So when you start with your trial of finalRender, you can download the finalRender trial from our webpage, cbis.com. For downloading and installing, we use our CBIS product manager. You just download it, it installs it automatically, it finds your max version, and then you can try out finalRender. For those of you who have bought the finalRender subscription, we are going to show you here how you set up what we think is a good method and way to set up your scenes, and how you should do your first steps with finalRender. Okay, let me just hop right into 3D Studio Max and we'll start working with finalRender. I'm going to do the following. I'm loading now, or importing a scene I found on the internet. This scene is the RenderMan Kitchen Challenge scene. Just got it from the internet. It's publicly available, so if you search it on Google, you can download it as well. I'm just importing it. Nothing special, nothing fancy. Keep in mind, this tutorial is not to show you how to do amazing modeling and scenes. This tutorial is here to show you how you can set up and start your finalRender journey. Okay, so we have the scene imported here into 3D Studio Max. And it's a pretty standard scene. We have one object, everything is linked to this object, and it is made out of these object groups and everything here. Let me just collapse these things here. Let me just choose collapse all, and we have everything in here. So that's our scene we just imported. The first thing we will see, it's an empty scene, so we got that as an FBX file, so imported. 3D Studio Max has it here. So the first thing we will see is there's no camera in the scene. So the first thing we do is create a camera. How about that? So let's create a camera. And for finalRender, because finalRender is a very unique rendering system, it uses unbiased path tracing. It's a spectral wavelength renderer, and it's really physically based. So everything is based on real world values. So we do suggest and recommend use the physical camera of 3D Studio Max. We do support it. There's no issue at all. In fact, we really think you should use the physical camera whenever possible. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm creating a physical camera, just putting it here in the room. Created the camera. I'll activate the camera over here, pressing C. You know the drill. That's all standard 3D Studio Max, and that's also the beauty of finalRender. So I'm adjusting my view here a little bit. Maybe move back a little bit from the camera, move around, and just make sure I grab all the important parts I want in this scene. And as you see here in the modeling viewport, we have the camera placed and everything is in the room right now, and we can see it in here. So now the first thing we could do is just go to our rendering setup. finalRender is already set up here because I saved it like this default setup, and now we can just start a rendering and see how it goes. So we will have a rendering here in a few seconds, and the thing we can see is all is white. So that might happen when you import an object and nothing is set and there's no lights and anything. So finalRender will create a sample light, and it will be very bright. So what I'm going to do here right now is use the exposure control. And with the exposure control, I can adjust my rendering, and we will see, okay, that seems more like a default light. And no shadows, nothing in there. So we need some light in there. And the next step you would do is, after creating a physical camera, is add some lights. And I can see these black areas, they look like windows. So maybe there should be light coming in. And for that, I would suggest we are going to use a daylight system. And good news is, in finalRender, we do support the daylight system. We support it fully as 3D Studio Max delivers it. And for that, you would just go here, create your compass, and add your sun. And the great thing is finalRender is fully integrated in 3D Studio Max, so it supports this kind of things, including all the time of day, for example. Let me just bring it here. So we have the light here, and here's our window. So we should see some light shining in here when we go there. So that's all we have. And now if we go in here and just render again, we will see that our light looks different right now. So we get a totally different scene. And as I expected, we have the sun on the floor. The sun is shining through the window. So we have all the things here in the room. Now light is bouncing around inside of the room. Still, if I reset, it's way too bright. So we need to work on that. And we still have the black windows. So I'm not seeing any sky. So for that to happen, we need to go back to our sunlight system, daylight system. And as you can see, we have the standard and skylight. So those things are supported by finalRender. So if you want to work with the standard sun and sky, you can do that. However, it's not recommended. Best practices is choose what we have implemented, the finalRender sun. And we're using a unique approach to the daylight system here. The finalRender light is a unified system, so it has sun and sky in one setting. This is because we are using the physically accurate approach. So our wavelength path tracing, unbiased path tracing, is calculating the sky in a totally unique and different way than any other renderers. So we actually calculate how the different wavelengths go through the sky and create the colors you see there. So for that, we choose finalRender sun. And as I said, we don't need to activate the skylight because it's already, when you have the finalRender sun, it's already a sky with it. So you can't even avoid it. It's always there. So what we have here as well is the show in environment. So when we render now, you will see that our windows are no longer black. And our room gets really bright, still very bright. So we could play around with the exposure a little bit. But what you see now, our sky is there and we get a nice bright sky outside. So the next thing we want to do is we want to adjust our camera to real world values. As I said, we support the physical camera in 3D Studio Max, and this is the camera type you should use to get accurate results. But if you want accurate results with finalRender, you need to work with accurate values, proper scaling, and all these values you really see also in the real world. So what I'm going to do is I'm adjusting the camera. And before we do that, let's just assume, because I just pressed render, we had to wait, load the scene, render again, render again. Let me switch to a much better way of handling this scene. And I'm going to choose the active shade mode. Active shade is fully supported and in a very unique way. It's really powerful and it works really robust. And what we can do here is we just activate this option, active shade, and what we will get is a real-time rendering of the scene. Let me just move it here. So we have here the real-time rendering. And now if we go into the scene and I'm going to select the camera, I'll get the parameters of the camera. And now we want to make sure, because we are using a physically accurate renderer, that we create an environment that we can realize or understand or recognize. And I'm doing that. So an aperture of 8 might be okay for a start. The first thing that is not really real world like is the shutter speed. So I want it for 1/10 of a second, and we use 1/100th of a second here for our shutter speed, and also what we want so that we can recognize what real world values are. I'm going to set it to 100 ISO. So that's usually what when you have any digital camera, DSLR camera, you would start with this kind of settings. You would have an ISO of 100, depending on the scene and lighting situation. But those are values you can find on a real world camera. And those are the values we support, and finalRender is built around real world values. And this is what is recreated with finalRender. So now that we have set up all these things here, we can start dialing in values. For example, we could use a different aperture to make it darker so that the window outside is not blown out. And these effects you see here, when I go with the aperture down to get more light in here and the windows get blown out, these are physically accurate effects. That would happen with a real camera as well. If there's a strong light somewhere and the shutter goes down, things are blown out or getting dark. So this is how the real world camera works, and we do support all these kind of effects. But this stream is not to explain and go deep into the camera settings. We can do this in a different stream. It's just the first steps, your best practices. So we have created the daylight system. We adjusted the camera. One more thing I want you to understand and adjust is the exposure control. So with the exposure control in 3D Studio Max, let me go to the exposure control. 3D Studio Max usually adds the exposure control when you create a physical camera. So it's sitting here, physical camera exposure control. And with this camera, we have exposure control. We have one setting we suggest you should do, because finalRender is meant to work like a real world camera and is meant to work and create the same images you would get from a camera, and that is a raw image. To get that, you need to turn 3D Studio Max into a linear behavior, because we want to have the full HDRI or raw image data that's available. We don't want that 3D Studio Max touches our linear information in the picture. We are going to adjust it later. With our frame buffer, we can adjust and do tone mapping as much as we want. But if we allow Max to screw and mess around with our linear calculations, you no longer have full control over it and you lose information. So this is why these two settings I just did here, you need to do that as well. So that's what we think is the best practice. Get rid of whatever strange things, whatever this idea was behind these settings, get it like that, and you should be able to get a full raw image or HDR image with all the information and pixel information and light information we want. So we have done that, and now we can start doing some work on the scene itself. So I'm going to maybe move a little bit deeper into the scene where the dishes are. Let me just concentrate on that area. Let's go a little bit out here. Let's say we want to have this area. I like that. So the next thing we would want to do is, when we have our rendering here, let me just move that up here, is we want to work on the materials. And let me just, for that, bring up the material editor. And we want to work on the materials now. So when we work on the materials, we have several options. And the first option I would want to show you is the finalRender physical material. So the first thing we do is we go in here and I'll show you the finalRender materials. So finalRender comes with a lot of materials, also some special purpose materials, but the most of the time you want to play around with the finalRender physical material. That creates all kinds of materials you would find in the real world as well. It's a pretty complex material. It can go very deep. We are not going to explain every parameter here, but I just want to show you how we can work with this scene now and brush it up a little bit. So for this scene, we are going to have let's start with a metal. I want a brushed metal, and also let me just name that metal. So we created just here this brushed metal, and I'm going to assign this material to the pan here. And I'm going to assign it to that pan as well. So now we have the material here. And one thing I already see here is, because it's an imported mesh and I don't know what the idea or the intention was or why it was that way, we want to have a little bit of a better definition of our pan. So I'm going to select both, and I'm going to apply a turbo smooth to make it more high resolution and round it out a little bit more. And as you can see, now we have nice round pans here hanging here. And let me just rotate a little bit and move over here. So I want to do the same thing for the dishes, for the plates. So I'm going to see if we have finalRender physical material that gives me a ceramic setup. So we have a ceramic setup here. Let me just bump that up a little bit and get the ceramic a little bit going. Let me just reduce that a little bit. So what I want to do is select the objects in here. So I want to select the plates here, and same deal here. Select all the plates, the dishes here, and assign this material. And as you can see, instantly it updates our material in here. And because I want it a little bit more white, and I want it less reflect, way to reflect, something like that. And the same deal with the dishes here. You can see that it's not really high resolution. I'll add a turbo smooth as well. And let's subdivide it one more time, and we see now we get nice smooth dishes here. And that's the great thing. I think, or I hope you realize what we're doing here is I keep the rendering dialog up here always open. So I adjust the things, I'll keep it always up here, and we are working our way through this scene here right now. So the next thing I want to do is add some chrome, because chrome in the kitchen is always nice. So let me just name that chrome. First, I want to select physical. So we have the chrome here. Let's see if we have a preset chrome. I'm just working with the finalRender presets right now. So there's nothing fancy or special. I just go here, put it on the kettle, and also on the spout, and also up here. And as soon as we do that, we have our chrome kettle up here. And then I might want to have some black rubber material as well. And we just go into the physical, FR physical material. And that's basically how you can really work your way through the scene, rubber black. Keep in mind, I found the scene online, so there's no materials, there's nothing on it, no lights in it, and so on. I'm just showing the basic ways how to start working with finalRender. So let me just add that here, and the chrome on this handle thing here. So now we have this black rubber and the chrome kettle. Because I'm lazy, I'm also abusing the black rubber for the stove, which is not really black rubber. It should be more black, something like a black metal, but I don't care right now. I just assign the material here. If I'm able to hit it here. Oh, I accidentally. Doesn't matter. So now we have that, and we can now start making our way through the scene. And the next thing I want to have is this thing here, our dish rack. The wooden dish rack says it should be wooden. So let's select all the wood sticks here, and now let's find a wood material. And as I said, we have a few setups right now. We are at this moment adding more materials and working on some more materials that makes life easier for you. The presets will come. However, There's a great thing. It's already in there. It's in every 3D Studio Max on this planet. You already have over 1,000 materials you can just choose from and use it. finalRender is the best integrated renderer you can get. It's a GPU, CPU renderer. It doesn't matter. It supports the mental ray materials and the Autodesk library. Here's a little trick I want to show you. When we go here and check the show incompatible, we get all the other materials as well. Mental ray, for example. Yes, all the spheres are black, but the good thing is finalRender can render them. We can perfectly render these materials. An Archon design, car paint, matte shadow reflection, subsurface scattering, all these materials work. And best of all, the Autodesk material library also works perfectly with finalRender. So we can go in there and let's have a look if there's something like wood. And yes, see, here's the wood. And let's just pick dark, no glossy material. I'll pick that. And keep in mind, this is an Autodesk material library material. And then I'll just assign it to my selection. And you will see, there we go. We have the wood in here. So that's the beauty of it. finalRender is so powerful. And what we're doing here, you have to realize that we have a GPU rendering at the same time as well. So we have all these materials. We did the hard work to recreate all these materials, textures and shaders and whatever is in the background. We created this as a GPU renderer as well, or shader as well. So that's a very powerful thing. And I just realized we have this beautiful toaster back here. So let's just use the toaster and add the chrome to the toaster here. And how about we add some plastic looking thing for our bottle back here. So let's go back to finalRender physical material. We have some transparent things. Let's say we want to have the glass material, and I'll assign the glass to this dish soap here. And to make it a little bit more visible, I'll change the color of my dish soap here. And let me just reduce it a little bit more, something like that. It looks ugly, but who cares? We can change it to something like that and just make it a little bit more transparent. So I'm working right now on that. So now maybe the countertop, we want to add something to the countertop as well. As I said, we have full access to the Autodesk material library. When you activate here this little trick, show incompatible, you will get all the materials, and we do support this material library. So we have concrete, fabric. Let's see, what do we have in finish? No, nothing I want. Liquid masonry. Don't like that. Let's go back to the wood thing for our countertop. Let's see if we can live with the wood boards, and I'll just assign it to the countertop. That's our counter, and I'll assign this material here, and we see it's there. And then we could assign the UV coordinates and all this stuff if we want to. So and we can assign all the things like reflectivity, so we can make it more glossy or less glossy. So all these settings can be used and adjusted here in real time. Just in here and have it like that, for example. So and the same for glossiness, we can adjust it here as well. So this is how you can work and adjust your scene in finalRender, and how easy it is to set up your scene. One last thing I want to do is let's add a light inside of this room. And for that to happen, I'm going to, this is the lamp. Let me just move a little bit out of our view here. get a more wide angle view. Here we go, and let me move a little bit down. So here we have the light, and I want to add just a light there. And for the light, it's the same rule. We do suggest, and you should always do it, use an FR area light. The finalRender area light is the most flexible, most powerful light you can get in 3D Studio Max. You can turn it into all kinds of light sources or light types afterwards. So I'm just going in here, creating the light. So right now the light is down here. I'm moving it up here to our light, just a tiny bit underneath the light itself. And I don't want to have a rectangular light. I want to have a disk light. Also want to have a really strong light. Let me just put up the power a little bit. So now the light is on. I want to have it visible so we can see the light. Let's move the camera a little bit down. We just go here, grab the camera, move the camera a little bit down so that we can see up there. And yeah, I got it pretty right in the first run. So let me just pick the area light and move it just a little bit up here, and the same thing here. So we have some distance we have here. Let me just up. So right now we have this area light here illuminating our scene, and I made it a little bit powerful. So let me reduce the power of the light a little bit, and I can also adjust the color of the light, so that's no issue at all. So to get a little bit of a color tone or tint in here. And one other thing we have here right now is we have this box here outside that is frozen right now. When I move back a little bit with my camera, let me just move out a little bit, we see that we are in a room, but we don't see the room in here. So the camera is still inside the room, but we can see through. So that happens actually pretty often when you import stuff that normals might be flipped. And the room is called room blocker. So how about we unfreeze that? And we say, yes, unfreeze that room. So we can select it now. Let me just select the blocker room. And for that, we have to choose a material that would close the room for us. And we will go and just use a finalRender FR Physical. That's a two-sided material by default. And let me just make this a little bit matte room, and I'll assign it to the object. So we didn't see any updates in the renderer. For that to happen, because it's about normals, we have to just run again, and then you will see that we are actually inside of the room. And now the box is really closed. So we have this box around, and the only source of light is now our area light and the daylight system. The light coming in here, as you can see here as well. So if we were to, let me just go to our daylight system and select the sun. If we turn off the daylight, we only have now interior artificial lighting. And then if we turn on our sunlight, we have the sunlight back. And for interior scenes, illumination should be a little bit different or change there a little bit. So let me just go to later in the afternoon. So now the sun is going down. We have here the sun with the orange tint, and we can even have a total sun going down, having a dark out. So that's what we can do here. Oh, I'm clicking the wrong way. Let's get the sun back again. You see here the sun shining in. And for that, we need to adjust our camera. If we wanted that, we select the camera, go in here, adjust the camera, the illumination a little bit. So we go down to 80th or even 50th. So we get more light inside of this room, or 20th of a second. Another way is what you could do in also with the real camera is go up with the ISO level. So we go to 400 ISO levels, and then you will see we will blow out the windows because these are very bright, but we get more light in here. So you can balance that light later in our frame buffer and use all the full HDRI possibilities and settings in our raw frame buffer, where you can do some tone mapping and adjust after the fact. And if you don't like these blown out windows, you can also do another trick, which is not physically accurate, but who cares? We are in the digital environment. We can reduce the environment multiplier to say 0.2, 0.6 to your liking. So you can even adjust it here so that we can even turn it completely off or something like that, so that we get a little bit of the blue and still have a nice illumination here in the room. The same thing is when we want to adjust our light, we can go here, select our area light, and then in the area light, for example, we can go ahead and use in the area light, for example, one option, that's the directional parameter. So we can say we don't want to spread it out as an area light, or let's go to 80%. We only want to concentrate the light in a certain region. Then we would just increase the power of the light a little bit, and you would get a more of a directional light, and then the light bounces around with GI as well and all this. So now it's more a directional light, as you can see down here. So we get more like a spotlight. And let's go back to a full area light again when I go here, and then the light spreads out all in the room, and we will get a really nice illumination in the room. And then you would place more light spots there. You would also be able to place sky portal here. So let me just summarize what we have learned here in this stream. As I said, it's not a stream to show you how to do fantastic scene setups and all this stuff. It doesn't go into the depth. It's about the principles, the better practice with finalRender. And what we did is we imported a scene with no materials at all. We created a physical camera. finalRender supports the physical camera. Created this physical camera. We adjusted the physical camera. Keep in mind the exposure control. Make it linear so that Max doesn't mess with all our rendering information. Adjust the camera to your real world situation. Then we created a daylight system. We support all the daylight system in 3D Studio Max. However, we recommend use the finalRender Skylight and Sun, because this is the only one working in a physically accurate way. And then we started to add materials. And as I showed you here in this rendering, we added the materials here. And let me just move here. So we have the materials working here nice and fine with the porcelain, wood here, metal, and all these things. So then we just add materials. And the great thing is finalRender comes with its own materials, with its own presets, very fast, very easy to use. And it supports all mental materials inside of 3D Studio Max. It supports the Autodesk material library as well. And on top of it, you can also use our scene converter and use V-Ray materials as well in your scenes, or convert a complete scene if you want. I hope you enjoyed this stream, and that's it for now. Please check out our other streams, and thanks for watching.